you'd ended up in a couple of dark places. Anything like really, really notable?
Well, I mean, the biggest challenge I've had is my personal life. You know, I've been divorced 3 times. I got married at 18. My girlfriend got pregnant. I wasn't going to be like my deadbeat dad. So I'm like, you know, and she flat out told me right from the jump, hey, I'm having this baby, whether you're on board or not. So I knew regardless, I had a kid coming, and I wasn't going to put my kid through the same stuff that I grew up going through. This feeling of I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough for my own father. My own dad never came around. He never paid support. One of the reasons I love to hunt and be in the outdoors to this day was because that was the only time we did get to bond. He would come take me out of school for 4 or 5 days, and we'd go hunting, chasing deer or chasing elk. We've never got anything ever, but I was in the woods with my dad. And so, you know, one of the things I miss about fighting is that was one of the things that brought us together. I didn't talk to him for over 10 years. I was away in the Army and away in college and didn't see him or talk to him for over 10 years. I moved back to Oregon State, and start coaching. He's quitting welding and doing the pipeline stuff up in Alaska, where he went to kind of hide out, and comes back down to the lower 48, and we reconnect. This is right before I started fighting. And so I started inviting him to come to the fights and bringing him to some of those. And he loved them, and he loved the fighting. And
we built a relationship.
We found some common ground from the days of him, you know, cracking me in the head with the butt of his rifle because I was dragging my feet or cracking sticks, making too much noise. To you know, we actually had a real relationship and started communicating and getting to know each other and all of that. And then, you know, eventually he passed away.
It's got to feel good that you were able to do that, though.
Yeah, it's interesting because when he passed away, you know, my 2 older children didn't know him at all. They hadn't spent any time with him. It was kind of strange having him come to Oregon from southern Washington. When he moved out of Alaska, he moved into Payelle, Washington, in south central Washington, which isn't that far from Corvallis. So he would come down, and the kids didn't know him. They'd never grown up with their grandfather. They didn't know him. So it was a bit weird. I didn't know him that well. So it was this stranger in our house who was my, you know, supposedly my dad or my father, and that's another story. But yeah, it was very weird.
How was he with your kids?
He was, again, it was strange, but he was always friendly. He was always a gregarious guy. He wasn't a very outgoing personality, but he was a smart guy, and he was a nice guy. So they got along. But my youngest, my second marriage, and Caden, for whatever reason, now he'd moved down to the lower 48. I went through the first divorce. That was one of the first times that I was in a very, very dark place for a while. A sense of failure and scrutinizing that I had never experienced in my life, ever. And I was already kind of operating from this position of, I'm not good enough for my own dad. Now I've messed this up. I'm getting a divorce. I have 2 children. You know, I was in a very, very dark place, and I don't really talk to a lot of people about that. There's, you know, it just don't.
How do you?
I came through it. I never, you know, I made the plan in my head, but I never set about executing that plan or doing anything, acting on that. But it was definitely there, and it was something in a place I struggled with for a while, and eventually. The sun came out. I got support from some friends. I got, you know, I started some counseling, and I started to realize that a whole bunch of this stuff that was going into my head was fabricated in my own head. It wasn't real. I started feeling like everybody looked at me different because I was going through this divorce, and, you know, I would been unfaithful to my wife and all these things that I knew in my own brain caused this situation. And it always takes 2 to tango. It wasn't just me, but at the end of the day, you know, no one's harder on us than we are. And so it took me a while and some serious counseling to kind of come through all of that and understand myself better, understand why I'd made the choices I'd made, why I'd ended up where I ended up in that stage of things. And you think you're going to just march on and do better and not make those mistakes again. And you know, that didn't work out that way either. I ended up divorced 2 more times, and you know, so
we're always learning, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, that, you know,
Randy,
it's part of the human experience.